I never thought the end of a marriage would arrive so quietly. No shouting, no tears, no long conversations into the night. Just an email subject line. Let's be adults about this. I was sitting in a makeshift trailer in the Nevada desert overseeing a drone systems test for the Department of Defense. It was 6:17 p.m. I had just finished adjusting flight telemetry when the notification buzzed on my screen. I clicked. I read. Then I read it again. Vanessa, my wife of 12 years, had filed for divorce. The papers were attached. She'd emptied our joint savings, moved her things out of the house, and was now living with someone named Derek. It was all there in less than 3 sentences, simple, efficient, cold. I closed the laptop slowly. Didn't throw anything, didn't scream. I stood up, walked to the water station, filled a paper cup, and drank it in one long gulp. Then I went back to my work like nothing had happened. Because for now, nothing could. That night I replied to her email with just one word. Understood. I didn't plead, I didn't argue, I didn't fight, I just absorbed it. You see, I've always been the kind of man who doesn't start a fire, but I do know how to finish one. Calmly, cleanly, quietly. And what Vanessa didn't know was that I'd seen this coming. Maybe not in full, but in flashes. Small moments, lingering doubts. She changed her gym routine, stopped asking about my work, guarded her phone like it held state secrets. The signs were there, but I'm not the kind of man who accuses without proof. I observe, I prepare, I adapt. That's what being an aerospace engineer teaches you. Don't react, respond with precision. And so long before she hit send, I'd already begun protecting what mattered. My future, my peace, my name. This isn't just a story about betrayal. It's not even a story about revenge. It's about resilience, about how we hold our dignity when the world decides to let us fall. It's about what happens when a quiet man decides he's done being underestimated. So if you've ever been blindsided, if you've ever had the rug pulled out from under you without a sound, stay with me, because what happened next wasn't loud, but it was unforgettable. Betrayal rarely arrives all at once. It doesn't crash through your front door. It slips in through the smallest cracks like fog at dusk. You don't even know you're lost in it until you're gasping for clarity. For me, it started on a Tuesday. Vanessa stopped packing me lunch. A small thing. I figured she was tired. Then she stopped asking about my projects. I'd come home with updates about drone systems and fuel efficiency, and she'd just nod, barely looking up from her phone. At first, I told myself I'm just busy. People get distracted, marriages hit lulls. Right. But then came the gym bag. Brand new. Sitting by the door 3 nights a week. The strange part. Her shoes were spotless. She never came back sweaty. No towel, no water bottle. Just the faint scent of someone else's cologne on her hoodie. I noticed. Of course I noticed. One night she mentioned a work trip to Denver with the team from the dental supply company she did admin work for. She left on Friday, came back Sunday, didn't unpack until Wednesday. Her stories didn't line up, but I didn't press. I watched. I listened. I started writing things down, not in anger, but in awareness. People always ask, how could you not see it? But the truth is you do. You just don't want to believe it. There's a loyalty and love that makes you lie to yourself before you ever suspect them. You edit your own memories because the version where they'd hurt you, that one's too painful to accept. I told myself it was work stress, that maybe we were just in a phase. She was tired, I was busy, life was heavy, but deep down I knew. So I started making small adjustments. Quiet ones. I didn't snoop or accuse, I just began separating myself from the collapse I felt coming. I made sure the mortgage still in my name through a military assistance program stayed that way. I opened a secondary bank account and rotated 15% of my paycheck there. Not enough to raise suspicion, but enough to breathe if the air ever turned thin. I bought a fireproof lockbox and put my late father's medals and service contracts in my mom's old sapphire ring inside. It wasn't just stuff. It was memory. It was identity. It was the part of me I refused to let anyone walk away with. Looking back, the betrayal wasn't the moment she sent the divorce papers. It was every silent dismissal, every little wall she built between us when I wasn't watching. Betrayal doesn't always scream, it often whispers until it becomes the only sound you hear. And here's the lesson: never confuse someone being quiet with them being weak. Quiet people notice everything. They simply wait for the right moment to act. Not out of vengeance, but out of preservation. Because when you've given someone your best and they choose someone else, the answer isn't war. It's withdrawal, with clarity, with dignity. I wasn't planning revenge. I didn't want to destroy her. I just wanted the truth, and I wanted to make sure that whatever came next, I would stand on solid ground. And the next sign came not from her, but from our bank. It arrived in the form of a single text notification. One I almost ignored, but I didn't. And that decision changed everything. Some people think planning for the worst means you've given up on the best. I don't. I think it means you've lived long enough to know that trust and preparation are not enemies. They're partners. And if you love someone, you protect yourself just as much as you protect them. Vanessa never saw it, but I'd already begun drawing quiet lines. Nothing dramatic, no secrets, no fights, just little measures. I moved my name back to primary on the property deed, technically still valid because the loan was from a veterans program. She'd asked to be added before I had. When I sensed the air changing, I visited the county office during lunch one day and filed a quitclaim reversal. Legal, quiet. She never asked and I never offered. I also started collecting our shared documents, marriage license, birth certificates, insurance forms, and stored them in a fireproof safe in the back of my workshop. Out of sight, but not out of reach. Every Sunday I updated the list, not because I didn't love her, but because I refused to be caught helpless if love failed me. I even rerouted part of my paycheck into a different credit union. Just a few $100s each cycle. Enough to cover a month or two of expenses if the sky fell. I made sure my pension options were in my control, and that no changes could be made without dual authentication. There's nothing unromantic about self-protection. It doesn't mean you expect betrayal. It means you don't dismiss the possibility. And maybe that sounds cold, but to me, it was respectful. I wasn't preparing to leave Vanessa. I was preparing not to lose myself if she ever chose to leave me. Because the truth is, no one teaches men how to defend their emotional lives. We're taught to defend our country, our families, our jobs, but never our hearts. And when that heart gets blindsided, most men don't know what to do except rage or retreat. I chose neither. I chose to stay still and think. And in that stillness, I remembered what my father once said. You don't wait until the storm hits to start building the roof. You see, there's a kind of peace that comes with being prepared not for conflict, but for clarity. I didn't want to fight Vanessa. I wanted to understand her. But I also wanted to understand the system, so I started reading about property law, marital fraud, and signature forgery, things I never imagined needing to know, but now seemed too important to ignore. I wasn't trying to catch her in a trap. I wasn't even sure she was doing anything wrong. But my gut wouldn't rest, and life had taught me by now, when the gut speaks, you listen. Not because it's always right, but because ignoring it is always a risk. The final straw came one afternoon while I was back at the testing range. My phone buzzed. It was a bank notification, a withdrawal I hadn't made, large enough to set off the fraud alert. And just like that, the quiet ended. The camera didn't lie. That was the hardest part. It didn't soften the blow or offer explanations. It didn't stutter like a voice might. It just showed me what I hadn't wanted to see. After the bank alert came through, $8,000 moved from our joint account to one I didn't recognize, I drove back to base numb. I waited until nightfall when the dormitory hall was quiet and pulled out my laptop. Years ago, I'd installed a cloud-based home security system, motion-activated cameras with interior feeds synced to my phone. Vanessa had forgotten, or maybe she thought I never looked. That night I did. It started with the garage. A truck I didn't recognize pulled into the driveway. Out stepped a man, tall, shaved head, walked like he'd been here before. He let himself in with a key. I watched as he made coffee in my mug, wore my Seahawks hoodie, and fed our dog like it was his morning tea. Later we sat on the couch. I bought flipping channels like the and there was Vanessa in the kitchen, laughing. Not nervous, not guilty, just home. I didn't cry. I didn't curse. I just watched frame by frame as the life I'd built became a backdrop for someone else's. A man I'd never met. A routine I'd never been part of. There's something about seeing your space, the one you painted, fixed. Shaped with your hands occupied by a stranger, that strips away any last illusion. I remembered laying those floorboards with my father's old tools. I remembered saving 3 months' worth of overtime to buy that dining table. Every corner of that house had my effort in it, my story. And now it was a stage for someone else's performance. But it wasn't the betrayal that haunted me. It was how comfortable they looked, like I'd already been erased. That's when something inside me shifted. Not toward anger, but toward clarity. I wasn't just dealing with a broken relationship, I was dealing with a takeover. And if I didn't act soon, I wouldn't just lose Vanessa. I'd lose everything. So I made a list. I pulled out a notebook, same kind I used for flight diagnostics, and began writing. Call James' lawyer plus Army buddy. Review the house deed. Check on VA loan protections. Contact the bank for paper records. Investigate refinance possibilities. Secure my military pension account. I didn't know exactly what Vanessa was planning, but I knew I wasn't going to wait around to find out. And here's the thing, betrayal takes your breath away, but planning gives it back. In those quiet hours between midnight and morning, I didn't feel helpless. I felt focused. That feeling, focused calm, was more powerful than any rage could ever be. Now it wasn't personal, it was strategic. It's a strange thing seeing your name in ink in your handwriting, and knowing it isn't yours. That's what happened when James, my old Army buddy turned lawyer, slid the refinance documents across the diner table. He'd found them after doing a quiet check at the county office. Looks like your house was refinanced 3 months ago, he said, tapping the page. You pulled out $250,000 in equity, except I hadn't. I stared at the signature. It was close, impressively close. But the T in Turner didn't curl like mine. The M in Michael was just a touch too pointed. And the middle initial was wrong. I use an L, not a T. Small things, but things I would never get wrong. James leaned back. We can prove it's forged. Bank has to keep copies of notarized paperwork. If it doesn't match your ID or your known signature history, that's fraud. I nodded, but my chest was tightening. She'd gone further than I thought. This wasn't just an emotional betrayal, it was a legal one, a financial one. She'd taken my trust and written over it with a pen she didn't even know how to hold properly. I think that's the part people don't understand. You expect cheating to hurt. What you don't expect is the quiet humiliation of watching someone fake your signature and assume you'd never notice. I remembered sitting at that same table years ago with Vanessa signing the original loan papers. We were newly married. She'd held my hand, said she was proud of me, proud to build something together. And now here we were, me holding proof that she'd forged my name and her nowhere in sight. James continued calmly. If the loan was processed under false pretenses and with a forged signature, we can challenge it. Might take time, but the law's on your side here. I took a deep breath. And the money. Depends, he said. We'll need to see where it went. How much is left? But if it's been used or transferred, we may be chasing ghosts. The ghosts, it turned out, had names, and one of them wasn't Vanessa. A few days later, I visited the bank and asked to review the disbursement records. After some hesitation and a few security checks, they let me sit with a loan officer in a small beige office with buzzing fluorescent lights. He pulled up the account. Refinanced March 18th, he said, squinting. Primary borrower Michael Turner. Secondary Vanessa Turner. Co-applicant listed as Derek Langford. I blinked. Co-applicant. Yeah, he's listed on the income affidavit. That was the moment it hit me. Not only had Vanessa forged my signature, but she had brought him into the equation. Derek, the man I saw using my mug and feeding my dog. The man who now had his name tied to my house, to my future. And it wasn't just betrayal anymore, it was a full-blown scheme. I walked out of the bank in silence, clutching the copies they'd printed for me. The sky was bright, but I couldn't feel it. My heart was in my throat, but I wasn't afraid. I was awake, because now I wasn't just protecting myself. I was preparing to expose a system. It would have been easier if it had just been a messy divorce. Affairs are painful, but they're personal, private. You heal, you move on. But what I was beginning to uncover wasn't just personal. It was structured, calculated, almost professional. Leaving the bank, I drove straight to James. We sat in his office, legal pads everywhere, coffee gone cold. Something's off, I told him. Vanessa didn't just run off with Derek, she tied him into the house loan as a co-applicant. That's not impulsive. That's a strategy. James leaned back and folded his arms. You think this is bigger than her? I nodded. I think it's bigger than both of us. So we did what two Army men know how to do best. We started digging. Within a week, James found records that stunned us both. Derek Langford had been listed on at least 3 different property records in the past 4 years, all connected to women going through divorce. 2 of them had military husbands. One was in the Navy, deployed overseas. Another was Air Force, stationed in Germany. All 3 homes had been sold quickly under market value through the same real estate agent, Daniel Spencer. That's when it stopped being a marriage story and started sounding like a playbook. We found court filings where the women post-divorce claimed financial hardship. The houses were sold for less than market value, but the sales were expedited through cash buyers. Guess who those buyers were connected to Spencer's shell companies? Derek, it turned out, wasn't just a boyfriend. He was a trigger point, a wedge. Someone who built trust with women in vulnerable moments, encouraged fast moves, then handed the ball to Spencer, who cleaned the deal and took his cut. We couldn't prove Vanessa was fully in on it yet. Maybe she believed the refinance would save her. Maybe she thought I was hiding money, or maybe she knew exactly what was happening. The pattern was undeniable. And suddenly my pain had purpose. Because I wasn't just a victim, I was a witness to something larger. And I could do something about it. I contacted the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. James helped me submit a formal report, timelines, documents, forged signatures, bank activity, property transactions, names, dates. At first, I didn't expect much. Maybe a polite follow-up, maybe nothing at all. But 2 days later, I got a call from Agent Patel. We've been watching Spencer for a while, she said. What you just gave us fills in the gaps. They'd suspected he was laundering money through real estate using quick-sale properties tied to emotionally compromised sellers. But until now, they hadn't had military-connected victims, which meant federal jurisdiction, which meant this just got serious. She asked me not to confront Vanessa. Not yet. Let her play her next move, Agent Patel said. Sometimes people show you everything when they think no one's watching. That night I sat alone in the motel, lights low, TV off. Just silence. Not the heavy kind, but the kind that comes when the pieces finally start clicking. I looked around the room, basic, temporary, but it was mine. No one could fake a name here. No one could pretend to love me just to take something. It was real, and real was enough. There's a moment in every mission where you stop reacting and start designing the outcome. For me, that moment came over coffee with James 2 days after the FBI confirmed they were officially investigating Spencer and Derek. "We need to catch them in the act," James said. "Nothing they can talk their way out of. We need proof." I already knew how. Vanessa had texted me earlier that day out of nowhere. "We need to talk. Meet me at Riverfront Park tomorrow. Noon." I didn't respond. Instead, I checked into a different motel under a separate name and set up camp. The night before our meeting, I drove quietly to the house I once called home and parked a block away. At exactly 9:43 a.m., I watched Vanessa leave. Alone. She was headed to the park. That's when they arrived. A silver SUV pulled up, real estate branding on the side. Spencer stepped out with a clipboard. Derek met him on the porch like they'd done this 100 times. They shook hands, laughed, walked inside. I didn't follow. I didn't have to. Because a year ago, while Vanessa was on a spa weekend, I had installed indoor cameras in the name of upgraded security. Motion-triggered, cloud-based, completely legal, registered in my name as the homeowner. I pulled out my phone, opened the security feed, and hit record. The camera in the living room showed everything. Spencer snapping photos, Derek pointing out features. "Let's list at 470, Spencer said. "We'll push for a cash offer. I already have someone in mind." Derek nodded. "If we list low, we can sell quick." Vanessa says her husband's starting to ask questions. Spencer laughed. "Military guys always do. They bark, but they're tied up in duty or pride. Most take a settlement and disappear." I stared at the screen, my jaw tight. They weren't just trespassing. They were orchestrating a heist disguised as a real estate deal. They were saying it out loud, on tape, in my living room. I forwarded the live feed directly to Agent Patel with a single-line message: "Happening now." 27 minutes later, unmarked SUVs turned onto our street. I stayed parked down the block, phone in hand, watching it unfold. The agents moved fast. Spencer and Derek were let out in cuffs, confused, still mid-sentence. I didn't cheer. I didn't gloat. I just exhaled, finally. That night, Agent Patel called me. "We've charged them with wire fraud conspiracy and attempted real estate theft under false pretenses," she said. "Your footage sealed it." I asked about Vanessa. She just showed up at the scene. Said she didn't know what was going on. "We're still determining her role." And here's where the lines blur. Was she tricked or complicit? Maybe both. But this part of the story wasn't about who she used to be. It was about what I had just done, what I had proven. That being quiet doesn't mean being weak. That calm doesn't mean passive. Sometimes the most powerful response isn't to fight. It's to record, report, and reclaim what's yours. It's a strange thing to sit across from someone you once promised forever to, while lawyers trade words like assets, fraud, and intent. The courtroom wasn't dramatic. No shouting, no slammed fists. Just chairs that squeaked and fluorescent lights that buzzed a little too loud. Vanessa sat across from me, her hands folded, lips tight. She looked smaller somehow. Or maybe I had just grown. The prosecution offered a deal: full restitution of the stolen funds, her forfeiture of any claim to the house or my military pension, and a signed confession acknowledging the forged signature in exchange for no criminal charges. The law gave me that choice: to press charges and push for jail time, or to take what was mine, walk away, and let her rebuild her own path. James looked at me. "What do you want to do?" I didn't answer right away. Because sometimes justice isn't about punishment. Sometimes it's about boundaries. It's about looking someone in the eye and saying, "I see what you did and I still choose to live free of it." I took the deal, not because she deserved mercy, but because I deserved peace. The court ruled in my favor. The house was fully returned to me, the pension untouched, the refinance was voided, and Vanessa was out. Of the papers, of the house, of the story. When it was over, she stopped me in the hallway. "I didn't mean for it to get this bad," she said, her voice barely audible. I didn't respond. Not out of cruelty, just clarity. There was nothing left to explain. Here's what I learned. Closure isn't a conversation, it's a decision. You don't need them to say sorry. You don't need them to see the full damage. You just need to choose what you're willing to carry and what you're finally ready to set down. And in that moment, I set it all down. I walked out of the courthouse, not as a man broken by betrayal, but as someone rebuilt by the truth. The truth didn't fix everything, but it freed me. And sometimes, that's more than enough. The house was quiet again. Not the hollow kind of quiet, the kind that hurts, but the kind that feels earned. I'd changed the locks, repainted the front door, got new keys, new linens, and a second-hand dog bed for Scout, the rescue shepherd I'd picked up the week after the settlement. He didn't know my story, and I liked that about him. He just wanted a dog and someone to trust. I'd started working part-time in custom. Nothing fancy, just real solid things I could shape with my hands: bookshelves, coffee tables, porch swings. I wasn't trying to run from the past. I just didn't want it living in every room anymore. Then one morning, over coffee and an open window, a letter arrived. Not email, not a notification. An actual handwritten letter addressed to Michael Turner in slow, careful cursive. Inside, a woman named Rachel wrote, "You don't know me. My husband's in the Navy, deployed when Derek and Spencer tried to do to us what they did to you. But because you spoke up, because you took the time to report it, we kept our house. We kept our home. Thank you for fighting back when it would have been easier to disappear." I read it 3 times. Then I pinned it to my fridge right next to Scout's vet appointment card and a photo of my mom. It didn't fix what happened, but it softened something I hadn't realized was still sharp. Because pain kept in silence tends to rot, but pain turned into purpose. That's something different. That's healing. That letter reminded me that our stories never just belong to us. We carry them, but sometimes they carry others too. And that's the thing about being blindsided. If you survive it with your integrity intact, you might become someone else's reason to hold on. The FBI closed the investigation 3 months later. Derek pled guilty. Spencer got 12 years. Vanessa moved out of state, no charges filed, but her role was documented. I didn't follow her story after that. Mine had changed. Not perfectly, not quickly. A year after it all ended, I sold the house. Not out of bitterness, but because some walls echo too loud. Every floorboard reminded me of what was and what almost happened. I needed a new beginning that didn't come with blueprints written in someone else's handwriting. So I bought a cabin outside Missoula, Montana. 2 bedrooms, a wood-burning stove, 10 acres of trees that don't ask questions, a creek that runs steady even when life doesn't. Scout took to it like he'd always belonged here, like maybe in some way we both had. I spend my days building furniture, fixing fences, and learning how to cook things that don't come in a microwave box. It's quiet. Sometimes too quiet, but it's mine. And that means something. Because what I lost taught me how to protect what I'll never lose again: my peace, my clarity, my voice. I don't think much about Vanessa anymore. I don't need to. But sometimes I think about that letter. About Rachel in North Carolina, about her home still standing because someone chose not to stay silent. That's the kind of man I want to be. If this story touched something in you, if you've ever been blindsided, betrayed, or had to rebuild from nothing, I'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment below. Your story matters here. Subscribe to Companion Stories for more true, quiet victories told not with vengeance but with strength. And don't forget to turn on notifications, because sometimes the softest stories are the ones we need most. Thanks for listening. We'll see you in the next chapter.